You have to tell me about the world of ancient games. Maybe we can start with the ancient royal game of Ur. What is it, and how were you somehow able to crack the rules of it?
Well, the royal game of Ur is a board of 20 squares in a rather idiosyncratic form. And it was pretty much unknown until the 1920s when Sir Leonard Woolley was digging at the site of Ur. And in the graves of the royal family, the Sumerian rulers, they found 4 or 5 boards of this pattern, together with dice and pieces, which showed that it was popular among them at this time, and also that wherever they were going in the world to come, they would want to be playing it. And so that was one thing. And we had the number of pieces and some dice, so lots of people had ideas about how it might have been played, and that went on like that for a very long time. And thereafter, boards for this game turned up in most of the countries of the Middle East, sometimes quite a lot of them. And the one from Ur dates to about 2600 BC. And from then down to the end of the first millennium, there's examples of boards from Mesopotamia itself and from Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Turkey, Greece, Crete, all over the place. And when you put all the boards together, you realize that you're dealing with a board game which was extremely widespread and extremely popular.
Across space and time.
Across space and time. So it lasted for nearly 3,000 years, and it was played all over the place. So it's one of those games which is like chess or backgammon, which you can say are world conquerors. Because the way I see the issue is that human beings, for a very long time, have been, shall we say, hungry for things to do. Because all through the Bronze Age and the Iron Age, there was no television. There weren't no nothing. And kids played with pull-along things, and adults had board games, and they're kind of embedded in culture from a very early time. And this game was so widespread. Tutankhamun, for example, in his tomb, there were 2 or 3 boards for it with the pieces. So it arrived in the middle of the second millennium in Egypt, and even the pharaoh played it. So you have a game which, the interesting point about it is that it spread across the known world without written rules and without people necessarily knowing the same language. So a merchant would end up in a bar, come from India or I don't know where, start seeing these guys playing, have a go himself, and it looks rather interesting. You go home and try and remember what it looked like and try and work out how to, be transported this way and the other. And so you can see that the board has 20 squares. So you have a block of 4 by 3, and then a bridge of 2, and then a second 3 by 2 thing at the end. So it's difficult to describe the actual shape. But what happened was, after about 2000 BC, the squares at the far end, which there were 2 on one flank and 2 on the other, were all put at the end of the central avenue. Mm-hmm. So you end up with 12 squares down the middle. So all the boards after the period of Ur have 12 squares down the middle and then 4 on each side at one end. Mm. So it meant then that when you play the game, you have dice to move the pieces, you have pieces all the same, and you obviously put them on your first corner, and you turn the corner, you go up the middle and off the end. And it was a race game of the kind that everybody knows from their own childhood. And some squares which had rosettes on were either safe squares or you had another throw, and you could maybe put 2 on one square, we don't know, you could try and block people. But anyway, the crucial thing is that the widespread distribution of this idiosyncratic shape and its lasting thing shows it must have been a very good game. if people more or less played the same thing on it everywhere. I mean, it may be that they were completely different games, but probably not. So this is the thing. It makes you wonder what would be about it that would fit so well with a wide appetite from different persons, different types of person. And the thing is that although it's a race game where you're at the mercy of dice and lucky squares and unlucky squares, that the process of getting your pieces on and off the board as a winner is primarily fortuitous. But it has built within it, it's the way I understand the game plays, a measurable quota of strategy.
It's a mix of probability and strategy.
Yeah. So most games are either just probability, like snakes and ladders, snake shoots and ladders, it's just a thing like that, or you have a game like chess, which is pure strategy.
It's a mix.
And the grown-up game in the modern world, where fortuity or chance and strategy have a good balance, is backgammon, which is a sort of grown-up version of this sort of game, where nevertheless, if you play according to the most rational interpretation, its strategy is a major factor. So what happened was that many people had ideas how it was played, and the route followed, and I did too. And then I discovered this tablet in the British Museum, which was written at a very late period in the 2nd century BC. So 2,300 years after this object existed. And it had on it the names of the pieces and what the pieces were like and various things about the throws. And it was obvious that the rules were to do with a game which was derived from this simple early game. And that working backwards from it, you could reconstruct the game in accordance with its later incarnation that might be workable. And it jolly well turned out to be workable, because people play this all over the world now. And they even play it in Iraq in cafes.
Wait, now?
They do.
Oh,
because
wow.
after it's come back to life, it's on the internet, people play. There are different rules.
That's
The ones that I
amazing.
invented are pretty much regular. So if you have a good balance between chance and strategy, and it's a fair game, and doesn't take 4 days to play like modern board games, so you can have a go, and if you're lucky, you win fast, and then you have another go, maybe best of 3 or something like that. It works out rather well. And once I was in California, in the Getty, and I had to give a talk about this with all the information, and there's lots of things to say about it. And the lady who ran the Friends of the Getty had a brilliant idea. So she bought in 20 or so commercial copies of this game, and they had small tables with chairs. And after the lecture, I was supposed to say to everybody, okay, this is what you have to do, this is how you play, because you can get the rules down in like 3 minutes like this. So I said, okay, first you have to do this, first you have to do that. So off you go. So there was silence. And then after a while, someone said, I hate you. I'm never playing this game with you again. When they never played it before, when somebody had escaped at the last minute, cleaned up, but just when they thought they were going to get, and it provokes that salutary, benevolent fury and rage in the players, which all good board games do. And they were happily married couples who were at the end of the afternoon phoning their respective lawyers to discuss the future, that kind of thing. Beautiful matter.
You think games are, our desire to play games, a mix of chance, a mix of strategy, is a part of human nature? You think that's always been there?
I do, yes. I think, you can say that in communities you have rivalry, hostility, and who's the best, who's the fastest, who's the strongest and things. And if you play a board game like that, all the reality of it is sublimated into a safe terrain.
Yes.
Where you can nevertheless get angry, but it's not like that. That's one thing. But more significantly, I believe, is the question of what in India people call time pass, which is not quite the same as pastime. Time pass is the question of what you do when it's too hot to do anything, which is true a good part of the day and a good part of the year. And grandmothers sit under trees with their grandchildren, and they tell stories, and they do this and they do that. And time pass is a very useful catch-all phrase for the existence of board games. And in India, there are many board games. Chess, of course, is the famous one, but there are quite a lot of three-in-a-row type games, or fox against geese games, and wolves against sheep, and all those sorts of things, which come out of the landscape in miniature and were played for pleasure. And also, in a kind of way, it doesn't really matter who wins, because you might play and it goes round and round and round, and eventually somebody wins, and then they have another game. So it's a sort of that kind of rather graceful, valid function for not wasting time doing something which is stimulating and beneficial without it being overpowering in either way. So I think it is a human matter.
Of course, we humans also sometimes mix in gambling into the whole thing to add some money on top of it, which I'm sure sometimes was involved here.
I think so, but probably only late on, because money as such, of course, that doesn't appear till quite late. But there are, we know in Mesopotamia, it's a rather interesting thing, there's a school tablet with 3 or 4 lines quoted from one literary thing and 3 or 4 from another literary thing. And one of them has this, "Oh my astragal, oh my astragal, woe is me, woe is me." And that's all we have. And I think this is an example of a genre of literature called the Gambler's Lament, because they use knucklebones or astragals as dice. And I'm sure there were people who bet sack of this or a roomful of that, and on the throw of the knucklebones. And this extract in the school text is probably from a literary tablet in which somebody lost everything, even though there weren't coins, because I think you're right that it's a natural thing for it to accrue. And also, maybe men and women play differently, because there are some games which were played in harems among girls, all on a hot afternoon, where nobody was going to win anything. But the rules tablet, which gives this kind of backhanded information about it, is couched in such a way that it talks about people in a bar, because the movement of the pieces is calculated in terms of food and drink and women, what you win. So the landscape in which the rules are couched for credibility is just exactly that setup.